My name is Matt Nelson. I lead strategy at a software company called You.i TV. And we have basically we simplify how media companies can build apps across all the devices they need to reach. We have a technology that makes that simple to do from a single code base. And work with a lot of the major sports leagues, Time Warner, Fox, as well as work with the folks on this panel as well. So the title of this is So Many Platforms, So Little Time. Winning the race for reach. And we wanted to be really thoughtful about putting together a panel that could kind of address this problem in a multifaceted way, kind of across the spectrum. So I'm kind of coming from the technology perspective in terms of an SDK to get you there. We have Jeremy here. I'll let them do a formal introduction in a second. From Local Now with the Weather Group. Raj from A&E and Bernarda from Roku. And so we kind of cut everything from content company to technology to actually a platform itself. And so hoping we'll have a really good discussion. One thing I want to say is it's a pretty small room, pretty intimate room. So I mean, as we kind of move through the flow and the topics that we're going to cover, we got really smart people up here. And just go ahead and fire out a question if you have it. Don't worry about a mic. I think it's small enough you can just yell out, and I'll just repeat the question so that we can capture it online. But let's just go ahead and just kind of have a good conversation. So with that, why don't we get going? So why don't we start with Jeremy? You want to just do an introduction of kind of yourself,
Yep.
the projects you're working on, and just kind of help people orientate around your business as well.
Sure. Thanks, Matt. Can everyone hear me okay? Yeah. Great. Well, like Matt said, my name is Jeremy Jones. I'm the head of product and innovation for Weather Group. And what that means specifically is for a digital product called Local Now, but also the Weather Channel. So if you're familiar with the Weather Channel, then you'll know Weather Group. And my history, my background is in design. So I'm a UX type of person. I'm interested in what the end user experience is going to be and how that affects their interactions with our products. And so, I sit in rooms with people that have MBAs and they went to Ivy League schools, and I have to duke it out with them as a designer. And it's a lot of fun. It's very challenging for me, so I really appreciate that opportunity. But projects that I have been associated with that sort of relate to where we are today are threefold. So the first one would be on 11/12/13, the Weather Channel completely redesigned its entire network. From back office, infrastructure to the look and feel on the front end. So from what the OCMs, our on-camera meteorologists said and did, to what they wore, to the graphics that we presented on air, to the studios and sets, and to the sort of architecture and the back office that fueled all of that. And so that was a huge project for me as a UX person, as a designer, and a career-changing opportunity. And if you look at the Weather Channel today, you'll see the sort of evolution of that design. And I would argue that's one of the best design networks out there, especially for live television. So I'm very proud of that as a sort of start for me. But that wasn't enough. When we relaunched the network, we were still presenting weather in front of a green screen. And so you had the man in the map type of presentation, right? Or woman in front of the map, if you will. And so our head of television at the time, David Clark, said, we need to reinvent how presentation is done of weather. And so the next project that I evolved to was augmented reality and bringing in cameras that could augment graphics inside of the new beautiful studios that we had just created for our audiences. And so what we did there was we took the person from in front of the map and we put them into these beautiful sets and we augmented weather right there in front of them. So we're immersing the viewer, the audience into that presentation, and we're telling really dynamic stories that way. So the first thing that you may have seen if you were watching was the anatomy of a tornado. Jim Cantori's standing there, and we're showing the supercell and how that forms, and it looks kind of similar to what people had seen before, and then all of a sudden, bam, the tornado came out of nowhere, and it filled the studio set, and it was going around, and he was walking around presenting how a tornado evolves out in nature. So another huge step for us, and we use that tool daily now. So we started with like once a month, and now we're doing daily presentations of weather in those regards. And those guys are, that design team now is still taking that even further, thinking about Unreal Engine and visualization and things like that. So that's something that I'm very proud of. And then what sort of ties into what we do today is Local Now. and the launch of 1.0 of Local Now. And so, long story short, IBM bought the digital business of weather and took those digital properties with them. And we found an opportunity to restart a digital presence. And so Local Now is our offering. And you can go download that app and experience today on any of your devices. But what it is basically localized weather, traffic, sports, news, and lifestyle information wherever you are in the United States. And so not only was that sort of a disruption for our company to build a digital platform, it was a disruption for my career as a sort of television type of designer and UX product guy, but also for the industry. So we looked at it like there is a sort of antiquated formula for local news and sports and traffic out there. How can we disrupt that? And so Local Now was our sort of solution for that. And so how that ties into what we're doing today is the 2.0 version of Local Now. And that's what we're engaged with our friend You.i on and some other partners. And taking that, that first iteration and making it better for 2.0. And so currently we're in that process. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go along today. But really making sure that that ties back into the mission of the Weather Channel, Weather Group, which is to tell stories as a storytelling company, so that our users have a safe and successful day. And so when we think about that mission and we tie it to goals for Local Now, and what's important for me today is we want to be the most widely distributed localized video service that can be provided for a user out there. And so we're doing that in 3 ways this year. And we're thinking about content that's laser focused towards the community. So we're partnering with content partners that provide content on a localized scale across the country. And then we're also building our own content. So we have our own editorial staff internal that's building content that's relevant to the community. The second way is by enhancing our apps. So we're taking the 1.0 experience that was fast and we're making it best now. And we're working with You.i, like I said, and making sure that that experience goes to market and enhances what we currently have today. We want to disrupt the daily habits of our users, and we want them to be engaged for even longer periods of time than they are today. And then we're looking at expanding distribution by partnering with meaningful platforms that have scale, that can offer scale for us in unique ways. And so as I think about sort of my journey and what we're doing, that kind of ties it up in a nutshell for me. And I'm excited to talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you guys deal with really cool use cases around like local and how you personalize around local. So we'll dig into a lot of that stuff. And then Bernarda, you bring an interesting perspective that's different than these two gentlemen. You kind of the horizontal view, right? So working with them as a distribution platform, why don't you maybe just introduce yourself and talk about what Roku's up to?
So Jeremy, you just made my job sound so boring.
Me too.
Yeah, right? Thank you for being here. Good morning. My name is Bernarda Duarte, and I'm Director of Content Acquisition at Roku. I've been at Roku about 3 years, which makes me an old-timer there. It's a fast-growing company. And how many people have a Roku in the audience, actually? Yay! Okay, so a lot of things that I'm about to say are going to be very familiar to you. So sorry for that. But I think, interestingly enough, I have the pleasure of working with folks like to my right and to my left, because I manage a lot of the partnerships. So Raj is at AE, and they are one of my partners. I have folks in the audience, too, from HBO. And have the pleasure, actually, of managing a lot of partnerships across the US and LATAM. So Roku, we believe that streaming is the future, right? That everything that you see today on TV will be streamed, and it will be in the 10-foot experience. The first Roku was actually created, many may not know this, to stream Netflix to the TV. And 10 years later, here we are, separate companies, again, super fast growing. We have over 5,000 channels on the platform, so lots of work for me, right? Job security. And we offer users, when we look at Roku, we offer users a lot of great unique features, right, that the competitors don't have. The one that we potentially get most good ratings for is the universal search tool. So the search tool that we have does not point the user to a specific store where you can buy content. You receive the results from free to most expensive. We also play nice in the ecosystem. So we have Amazon Prime, we have Google Play, we have YouTube. So all the content you can possibly get from, from these providers. And, we really have a very libertarian type of mentality around content aggregation. So 2 years ago, we launched a tool called the Direct Publisher. And I was actually part of the team that went out into the marketplace with it and try to get our best partners to be beta partners with us. And the Direct Publisher is a web-based tool that allows basically anybody to have a Roku channel. It's about 48 hours to launch the channel, and it's a templated approach, obviously. But it definitely allows for any publisher to be on the platform, so reduce the barrier to entry for that. And last year, we launched the Roku channel. The Roku channel is our aggregated experience for television, free TV. And right now, that channel is about top 10 on the platform. So, our user base has, received it really well. And we continue to put forward more and more products that will improve the user experience, right? And we can talk about all of those things a little bit deeper. But, the platform really is innovating, all the time. And we are excited that, we continue to grow.
Awesome.
Yep.
And then Raj, you're working on a whole bunch of stuff, a pretty wide portfolio. Why don't you just give an overview of that, and then we'll dive into some of the platform issues.
Sure. So good morning, everyone. Matt, thank you so much for inviting us this morning. It's a real pleasure. So folks, Raj Bahl from A&E. I'm Senior Vice President and Chief Technology Officer for our consumer-facing products. So A&E, as you know, we own and operate cable channels, both in the United States as well as globally. Channels like the History Channel, Lifetime, A&E, these are some of our flagship channels. From a consumer perspective, on the digital side, we have, we play in a few spaces. The first is what we call the advertising, video on demand, supported TV everywhere products, right? So really strengthening the value proposition of the cable subscription via your TV everywhere sort of authentication. We monetize these products using ad support. We were one of the first to jump in the sort of foray about 6 years ago, and we have presence on predominantly most major platforms: iOS, Android, Roku. We've been working with Bernarda for almost 5 years, Fire TV, and so on and so forth. So that's our first line of business. The second is about 3.5 years ago, we pivoted and we launched our first subscription video on demand service called the Lifetime Movie Club. That service is about 3.5 years old. On the success of that, about 2.5 years ago, we launched our second subscription video on demand service called the History Vault. Both services are doing really well, much better than our expectations, and are growing. So that's our second line of business in the digital side of the house. Third is what we call our knowledge products. So, History Channel, as you know, is just not, we just don't have long form shows. We also have historical stuff, this day in history. A lot of us have grown in this room looking at History Channel. Things like, so we do a lot of topical content, and we have products to support basically further these topical interests, all the way from voice to websites and so on and so forth. And fourth is really, you do all of this stuff and you start collecting data. And when you start collecting data, you actually start using data, both for marketing and advertising. So we are doing, these are 4 areas of focus for us. What's unique about us is we basically decided that this was a strategic area of growth for the company. And we decided to design, develop, and build all these things in-house across all these different platforms. And we've been doing that at scale ever since. Now that our sort of business has matured, it's interesting, I use this term for a TV company, but I'm talking about from really a digital sense, right? AVOD and SVOD business, which are relatively new businesses. And think of a cable television company trying to get subscribers to just re-up their subscription every month. So we are, now that we have sort of learned the business, we are trying to optimize the business and driving more engagement and reach and viewership. So my team is really responsible for building these platforms across these ecosystems, and it's just great to be here and discussing this stuff with you guys.
Awesome. So the data point's actually a good jump off to maybe a first discussion area, which is around prioritization. And so I know you guys use a lot of data and analytics at A&E, so maybe we'll start with you, Raj. I'm just curious to get your thoughts on how do you think about prioritizing platforms? Maybe some thought around how that differs among your different properties and what your strategy is there.
Yeah, it's something that we've struggled with somewhat, but I think we've also grown and matured over the last few years. So now that we've been doing this for a long time, we have a good sense of what are the good ecosystems that that are really growing rapidly. And we now have enough data in-house coming from all these platforms that give us that level of insight. So we've been using that very effectively to figure out not only what platforms we want to be on, when we launch new services like the History Vault, Lifetime Movie Club, what platform should we target them on first in our rollout strategy. And then we also use that information for what features to launch where and when and how to fine-tune them. So, and we do it based on a lot of our in-house data as well as data that we get from several third parties. A lot of the marketing agencies and stuff that you all use, publications, but we also use information that we get from our ad client partners like Freewheel and others. And combination of market intel. We also have a lot of discussion from partnership. Bernarda will come up with an idea and we'll discuss it, sort of evaluate it. So we basically use all of these approaches to figure out what's the right play for us on the right platform.
Right. Are there any interesting areas where one specific brand covers a very different set of platforms than another set of brands, and do you have insight into why? Or
Lifetime Movie Club or Lifetime, there are two different apps. Lifetime Movie Club is a subscription VOD app. Lifetime app, however, is a TV everywhere sort of authenticated video experience. They just don't work out on Xbox.
Yeah.
For obvious reasons.
Yeah.
So yes, there are some very obvious use cases for us that sort of stand out and one versus the other.
Cool.
Yeah, I was going to jump in when you turn to Bernarda and say, sometimes the willingness of the platform to work with us is a direct influence on what we do. Yeah. And Roku is a great example of that. So when we have opportunities through promotions or marketing materials, placement within their device, that definitely influences us as well where we want to be.
Right.
Yeah.
And marketing, I think you touched on this. You can underscore marketing in this sort of play. Whether it's any sort of app business, marketing is huge, and we can't survive on ourselves unless we don't use every single means of marketing. Whether it's through partners, whether it's through on-air time, whether it's off-air channels, email blasts. I mean, the whole name of the game, more and more as these services mature, really is acquisition and retention. And paid marketing to free marketing to partner marketing, I think all these are avenues. Part of sort of growing up, one of the things that we have learned is to start a service is relatively easy. We can crank out an app in 2 to 3 months on a new platform, but that's just the beginning. That's just getting into the game. The real game is really understanding it and sort of optimizing and developing all the skills like marketing, content strategy, and commerce strategy, and all of these things, getting them right is extremely important.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting point because we see in consumer technology there's like a merging of like technology organizations and marketing organizations where you'll have maybe it's like kind of a marketing quant sitting actually right on the technology team or vice versa, engineers on your marketing team. Have you guys gone so far as to actually kind of blend those personas and teams and internally, or is it still kind of you're just working together separately?
Working together separately right now.
Yeah.
And even so far as we don't really have a marketing team right now. So, those are things that we're building up in our industry or in our organization as well. So,
cool.
Yeah, we have a whole audience development team, and they're mostly comprised of marketers, right? But they have engineers that are embedded in the teams that are servicing them. We're a very unique platform in that sense, right? We partner with our networks and everybody the publishers that come to the platform to allow advertising within the platform, and also we drive tune-in. So we've done studies where linear tune-in is getting enhanced by digital, right? So it's been really effective to be able to provide that additional value to both the partners and to the advertising community.
Awesome.
Yeah, I feel like I'm harping on this point, but like the platform's willingness is huge for us. And we see some campaigns with one of your competitors, but just as an example, huge spikes in the amount of delivery that we're giving to our users. So it's tremendous for us, absolutely.
Right.
Just, I wanted to add something to that. I think for us, it's been a very interesting journey on this exact point. It's so we have a model where we sort of, the product, technology, design, UX teams are sort of working together because we use Agile Scrum methodology in sort of how we build our products. We also have a marketing function who sits really right next to us.
Yeah.
And it's taken us a really much longer than we ever thought to make the product teams realize the value of email acquisitions and different means of experimentation and collecting these email, so you have to run campaigns against your web products on your apps to figure out, how do you get, with TV everywhere things I thought were always confusing from a login perspective, and now you were sort of prompting the user to give you another email address, right? And we can't effectively market them till we don't really understand these customers and build a relationship, and you can do so with email.
Right.
So it took us almost, I would say probably a year to really hone in and say that, look, we got to do these things on every platform. We got to do this on web. We got to do this on apps. And I think after we did that, we have seen good amount of success in sort of collecting more emails of these users. And now we are starting to explore in terms of, we do a lot of marketing campaigns, and now we are sort of pivoting ourselves to figure out, okay, all right, now that we are doing marketing, how can we do better email marketing? How can we customize these email messages? I think HPO is a great example of this. I think they do a great job. And I think what we are trying to do is we're trying to learn from all these things and say, okay, how do we evolve our product strategy and our technology strategy to be able to do all of these things? So this is why I feel like marketing has so much more effect on this than we can ever imagine. And just hand-holding, and because the other thing is you can acquire a customer, you can bring them into the funnel, but the churn-out rate is extremely high, especially in subscription VOD services. I don't know what the experience of the room is, but we see a high churn-out. And you have to keep the sort of register clicking every month. And you do so by really understanding how people are using your product. You've launched new titles. You've made new shows available that they're interested in, reminding people, hey, we exist. It's Friday evening. Just come and check us out. And there's a lot of that I think that goes on. And it's been a huge learning experience for us, and I don't think so we are there yet, but I think we are starting to understand the importance of that. Right.
So that's actually, that sort of funnel is actually a good transition to an area I want to touch on next. Some of you in the room might have seen this chart. Netflix shared it recently. It's like an investor day. They did like a cohort analysis of where usage was by form factor. So basically at first touch, it was somewhere in the neighborhood of 60 to 70% of first touch with their platform was on mobile and desktop form factors. And then as users got to progress through their cohort and got to the 6-month mark, it actually just completely inverted, and it was 60 to 70% on 10-foot platforms. So it's kind of like, okay, once I choose to make this a part of my life, I'm actually going to migrate it to 10-foot, and I'll do most of my consumption there. And so it brings up, I think it ties in nicely to the last discussion in terms of, I'd be curious to get your thoughts on how do you think about, the different ways or sort of strategies by form factor. So do you do anything different on mobile and on 10-foot in terms of just bringing the user through that journey to, I have it on 10-foot, or has that not been your experience?
Yeah, so did I mention we were a startup? Yeah, the Weather Channel is not a startup, but we are a startup. So we don't really have anything. But so anyways, we see, to your question though, we see like 95% of our usage on 10-foot right now. But we think that's directly attributed to the type of experience that we've given to our users. Lean back, passive, there's no interaction. It's sort of, you turn it on and it knows where you are, and it gives you information for your area, right?
Yep.
Which is great. We do that really well. But what we're doing now is we're sort of we're overhauling that experience, and we're giving the user video on demand, chaptering, scrub forward, scrub back, pause, play, notifications, advanced analytics for us. So we're adding all of these features in to become more of a microservice type of experience, front end and back end. And we hope to see sort of that pivot to maybe the mobile experience more once we do that. So I think that's an answer to your question, but that's kind of where we are right now and how we're
Yeah.
seeing people interact with what we do. And we are creating video, and video is nice and pretty on big screens. So I think people appreciate that.
Right.
Yeah. So we're all in, right, for the 10-foot experience. Not only do we have devices, right? Not only do we have devices, but we also license our operating system to televisions. We have 9 partnerships with brands. And it's a value proposition that we're bringing to the marketplace, right? So the brands that we partner with, you can get a 60-inch Roku TV at Best Buy for under $300, right? So certainly, very, very much into the TV business. We also license the operating system and the hardware to MVPDs. So that program is more international. So we have Sky branded boxes, for example, in Europe. And we have Telstra, a few others in the Philippines and Africa. So that program, again, that has really grown our reach from a distribution perspective. We have a little bit over 19 million active users, which it puts us in there about like 3rd largest distribution partner in the U.S.
Right.
Yeah.
And you guys were early to that, the kind of the smart TV thing, right? And obviously there's the Amazon Best Buy announcement recently. And obviously in other regions, especially Europe, smart TVs consumption is pretty high, more than North America. I assume there's a thesis sort of internally that we're going to continue to see a rotation towards those 10-foot devices.
Absolutely.
Smart TVs.
Absolutely. We're definitely interested in continuing more partnerships abroad and Latin America, for example. So there's still a lot of growth, and I think domestically Roku is super strong, but bringing those brands globally, the brand globally is something that we're working on very, very hard right now. Right. It is a strategic focus for us.
All right. So maybe let's just close on the 10-foot, and I'd be curious if you guys have questions, jump in. I'd actually just love to maybe Raj get your thoughts on input 1, and you can pass on this if you want. But
10 feet?
Yeah, specifically around the set-top box, right? So obviously you've got great sort of linear relationship on the set-top box, but just curious to get your thoughts around your direct-to-consumer offerings.
Well, on the set-top, so we do have a partnership with Comcast, and some of our channels are available on Xfinity One, but we also have presence of History Vault and Lifetime Movie Clubs, our services you can get on Xfinity, as well as you can get it on Xfinity, and we are working with Amazon Prime too, and we are seeing a lot of success there. And I think these platforms are really growing, and we are seeing a great growth sort of come from these platforms. But I think overall, the 10-foot experience sort of is really important for us, because we've seen sort of the mobile has plateaued in some ways, and we are seeing the growth really come from OTT devices. Not only from overall number of activations, we see higher engagement. So, if you see 20, 25 minutes on sort of apps, you see 30 plus on the 10 feet experiences, because it's a lean back. You sort of let it run in the background. You can cook, you can scream and yell at kids and all that kind of stuff. Right. So, we are also seeing one of the things, the trend we saw from a monetization perspective is the ad sales market was sort of trailing on the OTT sort of platforms. But I think it's catching up, and that's awesome. And I think we are seeing good CPMs out there. We are seeing good programmatic is starting to mature also on the 10 feet experience. So I think the market is starting to evolve. It took a little time to sort of get moving, but it's starting to evolve, and we are excited about it. So connected devices, whether it's Roku or Apple TV and Fire TV and those things, all of those platforms are a huge priority for us, just because of these reasons, and we are laser focused on them.
Right. Awesome. Any questions on, just before we kind of move on to other areas from the room? Go ahead and ask me if you have them. So there's one of the interesting dynamics on these platforms is there's kind of two dynamics at play. One is you've got this kind of aggregation theme, right, where Roku's certainly 5,000 apps, and kind of celebrating that, and that's great, and sort of playing neutral. But other platforms working on really product-driven aggregation mechanisms, right? Where it's a master app with single sign-on and deep linking, where maybe brands are actually kind of being squeezed into sort of just having a player, right? On the other hand, though, you've got this crazy fragmentation where 5,000 apps on a Roku, et cetera, and you kind of got this signal to noise ratio problem, right? And I think really the key to both of those is these platforms are really less kind of destinations, but more actually just a place where these brands got to compete. I'd just be curious to think, just to get your thoughts on how do you think about improving your kind of signal to noise ratio, differentiation you're driving to kind of drive engagement, keep people engaged. Just how do you think about a lot of those competitive dynamics on platform?
Yeah, so I can start.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, we do. So we take our history from localization with the Weather Channel, a national broadcasted syndicated channel local to your community. So we have 4,000 stars. That's a very technical term for us. That are at head-ins, and then wherever you are around the country, you're getting local information on your screen. So it's weather data and traffic as well on the Weather Channel. So we take that knowledge, and we take that understanding, and we use that as a differentiator for Local Now. And so we're taking the ability to localize information at scale, and we're talking to these platforms and partners and figuring out ways that we can deliver that type of information to their users in unique ways. So if you look at the Amazon Fire TV lineup or Roku, Local Now is really one of the only opportunities for you to get local information when you want it and where you want it, and that plays into the mobile devices as well. So we look at things like that to help us differentiate on these platforms. And weather, of course, is the most hyper-local piece of information that there is. So we take all that history that we have from the Weather Channel and we apply it to what we're doing on our side. And we talk to our partners and platforms, and we get engaged, and we hope that it's a differentiator that they need on their platform to help deliver something at a low cost. And we find unique ways to do that. It's not just an all packaged into, so we'll send out videos on demand to partners like airports, and you can see our content inside terminals that's relevant just to the weather and perhaps maybe the traffic of the destination that the person's flying to. So we have unique ways of doing that. Doctors' offices, anything like that. It's very relevant for us. So we find ways to use that history with localization and understanding of weather and how that affects people, and we sort of use that as a way to target our products to their users. Yeah.
So yes, 5,000 channels at Roku. It's a big number.
Yeah.
So, last year in September, we launched the Roku channel, which is our aggregated experience and it's content-first experience that we figured when we went to talk to our users and did a lot of research, the free word, right, resonated. And the ad-supported networks know this very well. It's tolerable for most users to have a little advertising to consume free content.
Yep.
So we put that service together, and like I said before, it's now top 10 channel on the platform, and it has great content, lots of movies, TV series, little nostalgia. I think I was watching the Karate Kid movie the other night. That was probably the first movie I went to at a theater when I was a kid in Ecuador. So that was pretty, I don't know, pretty neat.
Did you do the crane kick?
No, I won't try. No.
Just thought I'd ask.
Yeah, no. So for us, really, it is discoverability is a big issue, right? I mean, let's be clear. The search tool we have does have about 500 participating channels, because you do have to pass a separate, and I'm not going to get too technical here, but you do have to pass a separate set of metadata to be able to populate the search tool, right? Yeah. So it's not necessarily just building a channel. And this could be a little bit of heavy lifting for smaller, publishers. So when we build the direct publishing tool, for example, search is part of that as well. So you get search, you get monetization, et cetera. So it's not, it's trying to really bring level a little bit of the playing field as well for this, because of the issue of discoverability, right?
Right.
And what else can I tell you about what we're trying to do that our earnings calls us tomorrow. So there's a lot of information I'm not allowed to share.
I'll be listening to that. I joked when we got together beforehand that I'm probably the only guy not on Wall Street that read the entire S1, but I'm a nerd that way. So maybe just to close this section on fragmentation, just curious to get your thoughts. Maybe start with Raj. You know, where do you guys see, or where do you plan in terms of how fragmentation in the living room is going to evolve? Do you guys have a view internally on how you see this going in terms of, is it going to expand, is it going to contract?
I think it'll continue to expand. At least at this juncture, it's going to continue to expand. And I think you have to play both games. You have to play the aggregation game, and you have to play the owned and operated game. And I think you can't succeed in either or without sort of having both. It's really because you can have an aggregated play, but you got to get noticed.
Yep.
And you get noticed by having your O&O play. And when you have your owned and operated play, it's extremely important because you get to know your customer. You understand what are they using, how are they using, what's working, what's not working. You're trying, just the fact that you have to collect money every month directly from them forces you to think differently. You have to reinforce your value proposition to your customers. It's not a fire and forget scenario. It's sort of like, how do I get the people to come back month after month after month? So, you sort of learn how to design for these experiences. You sort of learn how people interact with these experiences. You learn about the ecosystem themselves. I mean, we've learned a great deal about Roku, and we've learned a great deal about other ecosystems too. So, and I think, I can also say that, in our case, we have Lifetime Movie Club, we have History Wall. Those things have been in the market for a fairly long time with hundreds of thousands of subscribers. And we wouldn't have been able to done it if we wouldn't have created them as a brand on our O&O platforms. Because we created them a brand, now we can go to Amazon, or we can go to Xfinity, and we can go to others and say, hey guys, we have so many people on it, and this is what it can do for you. And we are seeing success from both channels. So, going back to that point, I think fragmentation is only going to get worse, not better. And I think you have to do a harder job of getting your brand recognized and creating that experience, and with continued innovation. And you can only do so with continued learning in your own platforms.
Right.
Yeah. I'll add a couple things actually from our partner channels, channel partners, sorry, that some of the networks are getting super savvy at this, right? So we know that the competitive landscape in terms of how many channels there are on the platform. And a lot of them, for example, Univision, Stars, Univision published a channel that was both TVE and SVOD in the same experience, the same app. Stars went direct to consumer. They skipped the TVE piece. And Disney just recently relaunched at the beginning of last year all of their kids' brands under one app.
Right.
So, I think the networks and the content partners are definitely understanding that, having a channel or an app for every single channel that they have on linear is not really the best distribution, right? And it drives your marketing costs, right? Because you have to go and acquire those users, et cetera. So driving them to a single point is obviously a lot more effective. And in a universe where, more and more content is available across, if you go to YouTube, obviously, perfect example of that, right? Very popular short form, et cetera. But, you're seeing also short form apps coming on board. CNN launched last year, Great Big Story, for example. So the nets are definitely looking at the industry very differently now.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. So let's switch gears. I feel like we're kind of coming to a little bit towards the end. There's kind of a dynamic that we've seen when we're just talking to customers where we're kind of entering sort of a second era, if you will, where sort of the first era was, everyone's sort of lighting apps up on all these different platforms for their brands. A lot of experimentation around just kind of seeing which brands will stick and that kind of thing. But from like a pure R&D and sort of technology investment perspective, we've really seen a shift from sort of building the app to really focused bets in terms of that R&D investment around areas specific to brands that can help them kind of really drive differentiation. So I'm curious to get your thoughts on just how you think about moving beyond kind of building the app and in your own specific brands, where you think those focused areas are that you can kind of place bets from a technology perspective. Maybe Jeremy, if you want to.
Yeah, so we're a startup. No, but we were so it's kind of 1.0 to 2.0 for us. Fast to best, monolithic to microservices. That's kind of what we're thinking about right now. That's the evolution of local now, and it's also the evolution of digital for Weather Group.
Right.
As a formal sort of P&L, if you will, within the company, we want to create an opportunity where we can meet the user where they are, and so we're building out a back office that is flexible. It's also comprised of elements that are going to help us collect data and know the user the right way. We're also thinking about the app development and how we create an app experience. And we don't do it 100 times, we do it one time.
Right.
And so we found partners like a company called You.i. And so we're working with them to figure out ways that we can do innovative things quickly, change the color green if we want to, without having to go through 15 sprint cycles, for example. And then we think about scale. So localization for us is our primary focus, but we need to scale that localization. So we need to partner with content providers that can help us provide that scale, but we need to also build teams internally that can deliver that type of information to our users quickly. And so we're thinking about technology and teaming in that regards. And then I think finally, biz intelligence is very important for us too. So we think about building out, as an example, a data pipeline and warehouse where we can start collecting all of this information. It's no good to build these new apps with this new functionality and features that if we can't collect that information and know what our users are doing and where they are within our experiences. So I think that those three things kind of combine into what we think are the core mission for us as far as the 1.0 to 2.0 and to innovate really as local now and a digital property for Weather Group, which mind you, we want to bring the Weather Channel into that fold soon as well. So that would be something that we'll set up for success for a much more established brand where the users are going to have a lot higher expectation of that experience.
Yeah.
And so we'll be prepared for that once that happens.
Awesome. Will you, Rush?
So we achieved ubiquity with our products on most meaningful platforms a while ago.
Yeah.
And we've now shifted our focus really on optimizing the business. And when I mean optimizing, it's really, can we do effective A/B tests when it comes to user experience options and features? We don't want to implement a drop down or a field on 4 different times across 4 different platforms. We don't want to wait for a year to roll out one feature across 10 platforms, right? So because of that, we've been looking at cross-platform development solutions, and we've recently partnered with You.i, you guys in Canada.
Appreciate the plugs, guys. That's great.
And,
I love the love at the table.
yeah. And I think...
And you could too, if you act now.
Yeah.
Wow.
So so the cross-platform development is really it's really important in today's day and age. If you want to evolve further, we want to make sure we free up our resources to be able to do more personalization. We recently launched content recommendations in our apps, and we launched it on few platforms and not all, just because you have to do it one platform at a time. So we are focused on that. We are focused on sort of identifying what are the kind of value-added features that will retain people. Giving option to download content for paying subscribers, giving them navigation, better navigation, a series of A/B tests around content placement and that kind of stuff. How to increase viewership based on continue watching at the end of the videos. How can we make smarter recommendations in those, or how can we make recommendations around email personalization and stuff. So we want to shift our focus from all the areas of sort of building the features to rolling out to really all these things to optimize the business.
Right.
The second thing is, going back to a point that Bernarda sort of touched on, it's the cost, right? In this business, you have to be very cost conscious. Sort of as these sort of apps sort of mature in their cycle, especially getting the most out of the subscription VOD platforms. So cost is a big piece of sort of what we're trying to do, and efficiency is a big piece of what we're trying to do.
Awesome. why don't we close? We just got a couple minutes left. Let's just.
I think I have a question. From the
Oh.
table.
Oh, good.
Could you talk about the mutual benefit of having A&E networks on the Roku platform?
Oh, we love
Both of you could kind of share that.
Roku. I mean,
Yeah. So we work. Yes.
I'm sorry. I'm trying to find out like what does Roku get from A&E networks and what does benefit does A&E networks get from being on the Roku?
Right.
Repeat the question so they.
You want to repeat the question?
Oh yeah. So the question is about what's the value kind of both ways for A&E and Roku working together. So what does Roku gain from having A&E on the platform, and then vice versa.
So from the point of view of Roku, of course, we want to have all the major brands for television, right? Because we're in the TV business. So we work with our partners very closely, and there is a value exchange, right? So on the side of the SVOD business, there's a rev share that Roku gets from being partners with A&E. And I think for A&E, what they get from Roku is 19 million users. So it's a distribution into these homes, right?
and marketing.
And marketing, that's right. And marketing, and like we'll do partner business reviews with our top partners, and we will help them, fill the top of the funnel for acquisition, help them, a little bit with retention as well. So there's quite a lot of tools from an advertising point of view that Roku offers, and that for us that's how the business, how we operate with the top partners, and then create other tools to allow smaller publishers to also be successful on the platform.
Yeah, and certainly from our perspective, it's Roku's the top platform, 10-foot platform that our customers ask for. So it's highly desired.
Yeah.
Yeah, and more and more, I mean, if you buy, I mean, a lot of people probably in this room have Roku sticks, but more and more chances are, to Bernarda's early point, you go to Best Buy or any other TV store and you buy a TV, chances are you're going to have, the TV is going to have one of 2 or 3 major operating system on it, Roku being one of them. And you want to have presence on these platforms because they're becoming ubiquitous, they're everywhere, and people are there, the masses are there. It's easier to get reach, but you really have to work hard too. You have to work hard in making sure that you are keeping your apps up to date. You're constantly refreshing them. You're working with Roku and trying to figure out what's your new product strategy, when how they are evolving the operating system. How can you leverage that operating system to your advantage? Because if you don't do that, then you will not get noticed as much. So it's a symbiotic relationship. And we find it to be a pretty fruitful one.
Great.
Yes.
So keeping in that same theme, both on the content and delivery side, we're talking mainly about domestic, and both of you mentioned both India and Africa and expansion. So either or both of you, if you could touch on what are some of the challenges you're encountering in markets as such?
So the question is, we've had a very sort of North American-centric discussion, and so the question is, what are kind of some of the challenges and dynamics that you've encountered when looking at new and emerging markets?
So for Roku, for example, a challenge would be the availability of search in multiple languages, right? That's a feature that we would have to build, because we have, right now, I think there's 3 languages that are available. So from a product perspective, being able to bring a product that is customized, right? Another example is on the monetization side, our payment tool, right? You'd have to be able to charge in local currency. And every single brand that goes out there global, Netflix went through this, the major ones will try to be as close to the local market as possible. You heard potentially that Amazon cut a deal with Televisa, which is one of the largest providers of Spanish language content out of Mexico. So I think brands in general, and I know for sure with Roku, since I do manage some of these expansion plans, we want to be able to do it well, right? And so putting some of these items in roadmaps take a lot of resources. Again, we just recently left the world of being a startup, right? So we're still in that sort of scaling and growth mode, and those are challenges that I think we're trying to face and getting them resolved very quickly, because we do believe that the international markets are the growth engine. We also actually evolve, like the box itself, right? TV in this country is distributed over the air completely different than it is in the format is actually different than it is in Europe and Latin America, for example. So adapting that box to be able to work for an MVPD in those countries also takes a lot of engineering resources. And those are the types of things that we have to do. And if you think about it, that's more of a business-to-business type of relationship, right? When we're the sort of vendor of the box. So again, being able to modify the box and create the infrastructure within those international markets to scale. Yeah.
I mean, some of the markets you mentioned, they are really big and really deep. And one of so the thing that we have learned is we really have to evaluate to figure out, do we have enough audience on some of these brands to be able to sort of go at it ourselves or with partners, and if partners, what partners, what's the content proposition? You just can't put some of the stuff from here and just put it there. Do you have enough local content and hyper-local content and that kind of stuff? So we are still at the early stages of figuring this out, and it's a pretty complex problem.
Yes, right here. Oh, sorry, we'll get to you. Yeah.
My question is going back to the cross-platform development that you're doing. Do you still do your web, iOS, Android in-house and only pushing the 10-foot like development to UI to a partner, or you hand off a whole brand to UI?
Well, our ultimate goal is to move lock, stock, and barrel. And the sooner we can do it, the better it is in the long term. I think we are taking measured steps to get there. We are trying to do this first on 10-foot platforms, starting with some of the platforms we don't have presence on. Once we get it right, learn the technology and learn the platform, it'll help us figure out what we need to do to get it to basically replace all of that stuff. So yes, that's the underlying vision, but we are taking baby steps to get there.
Yeah, in the back.
Question is, cable has found out that multicultural communities in the United States is where they drive their profit from. In your platform, are you reaching out to people of color who are in the United States? And if so, can you explain?
Yeah, so the question is, how does reaching multicultural communities tie into your strategy as a growth driver?
It's a great question. We are very agnostic when it comes to content, so we will publish anything that's not, porn or other types of bad content. So we allow, the publication of a variety of content in different languages, etc. Personally, because I work in the distribution side of it and do talk to a lot of partners, we bring in the Caribbean channel, for example, from the Caribbean countries to the US. We have, for example, Vemox, which is it's about to launch in a couple months. They are bringing aggregated content from all over LATAM, and they're publishing both here in the US and they're going to publish in Latin America. So Roku launched in LATAM. Sales of devices, we expanded from Mexico, which we did in 2015, and we just expanded into the rest of the South American region, except for Brazil, this past October. So, we're, really trying to reach every single, domestic and international segment of the population.
Yeah, I think I don't have a super awesome answer for you, but we are a startup. Did I say that already? But honestly though, we have started. We built a culture. We built a culture deck. We brought a team over in that culture, right? And so we started there. We have a persona that we're targeting, and it skews slightly female. So the content that we're producing is directed towards that persona, and we wanted to get out the door fast. So that's where we started. But what we do know, what we want to do is build. We want to create content for communities that's hyper focused to those communities. If it leads is something that we're not focused on. That's your local news. That's what we're trying to disrupt. And so I think getting to your question will be something that will be a part of our journey. But we're starting in those places that I mentioned. And so it begins with the culture. We get the right people in the door, right people on the bus, off the bus. Then we built a target persona, and we're trying to drive that content to that persona. And then we want to continue to hyper-focus on that and build great communities. And steer away from like that 6 o'clock news target audience and start building community-focused content and really doing that on a hyper-local scale. So, hopefully we get there. I think that's important.
Awesome. Yes.
My question is how, being an aggregator or content delivery, how you strategize your innovation initiatives in terms of existing user base and new users, and how to attract new users that you currently don't serve, and how often do you use customer feedback or direct consumer initiatives to get where you want to be?
Right. So the question is, how do you differentiate between innovation that drives, new user acquisition versus engagement of the existing base?
So yeah, I can take this on. So since our products are now, I would say probably quite mature, we take acquisition and retention very seriously, and we look at the beginning of the funnel. So from the acquisition perspective, we really look at, okay, how do we customize the message? How do we get people, and how do we get them to subscribe with minimum steps? Or if it's a subscriber on TV Everywhere platform, well, if it's a non-subscriber on TV Everywhere platform, how can we get them to sample something so that we can actually convert them to a paying subscriber? So we look at these acquisition retention funnels very carefully. We do a series of A/B tests all the time in trying to focus on these segments of audience. We drive our marketing based on these segments of audience. We have done some work around emails, but we're thinking of more mature strategy around this acquisition and retention funnels. And lastly, how earlier our product teams used to be structured purely on a AWOD product or on an SWOD product, and we are thinking of, does it make sense to structure them in acquisition and retention model where one team is really focused on initiatives that will get people to sample something or get into a trial, and then there are a series of features, like continue watching and others that really focus on getting people to watch one more video. So these are some of the metrics we sort of measure our performance, and we basically pay attention all the way from acquisition and through subscription and retention, pretty much through that lens.
All right, we have time for one last quick question. You've been very patient, thank you, and we'll do a very quick answer, and then we got to wrap.
Hi, I wanted to know, what is the monetization relationship between content providers and an aggregator such as Roku? And I apologize if this question was probably asked already. Like, does Roku pay the content providers, or vice versa, or is it ad related and it's a share? How does that work?
Yeah, Bernarda, do you want to address that both, like maybe subscription share and ad share, like
Sure.
two lenses?
Yeah, so by the way, everything is on our website, so our distribution agreement is there, and you guys can take a quick look at that. But yes, so we have a revenue share model with SWOT services, and we also have a rev share / inventory share with the ad-supported partners. And what that means is simply we do have our own ad network, Roku does, so we're able to fill impressions on the platform based on that inventory split. Or if you don't have your own sales force and you're not a big TV network that has a big sales force, we could sell it for you and pay a rev share to the publisher.
Awesome. Great. So that's all we have, but we're around, so if you have other questions, feel free to come up and ask them, but appreciate everyone being here today.
Thank you.